I desensitize myself to it. I
Hey guys, my name is Rachel and welcome to episode number 2 in our Psychology of a Killer series. If you missed yesterday's episode, make sure to go ahead and check it out. We talk about a lot of interesting things scientifically and a lot of research. In yesterday's episode, we talked about the physical brain anatomy and physiology and chemical imbalances that drive someone to want to be a killer. In today's episode, we are going to be talking about the different types of killers, the different motives that they have. Why do they do what they do? What drives them specifically to do what they do? Let's find out. So the first type of killer that we're going to be discussing is the one who had suffered horrific childhood abuse. Now, in my last video, we talked about how most killers have suffered some sort of childhood trauma, childhood abuse, or neglect. But for some killers, it goes deeper than that. It goes deeper than just that abuse causing some sort of physiological change in their brain. It goes further than that and is actually what drives them to want to kill rather than it just causing a brain defect, if that makes sense. So to most people who had loving, caring parents growing up, the world is secure and a decent place. They grow up with a relatively healthy view of themselves and others, which allows them to create meaningful relationships and give and receive love freely. However, those who have been severely mistreated in their earliest years by the only people that this young child knows, they will grow up seeing the world as a hateful place where human relationships aren't based on love and acceptance, but power, suffering, and humiliation. After being tortured and harmed in their earliest years, they may seek to inflict that same harm and suffering onto others. This person's psyche has been warped in such a way that they only feel power and satisfaction by inflicting harm on others because that's all that they know. The only time that they feel alive is when they are causing someone else's death. Again, as I reiterated in yesterday's episode and will continue to reiterate, not every child who suffers abuse grows up to be a killer, but many serial killers have a history of horrific child abuse. And also, like I said, some people's brain chemistry and anatomy is altered by this abuse and neglect. But again, not everyone's motive is to kill because of that. It just happened to them. It's not something that they actively always think about. It's not like, I was abused, so now I'm going to abuse others. But these people in specific, they were abused, so now they want to cause that harm onto someone else. The next motive that we are going to be discussing, which is a very interesting one to me, is the angel of death. Mercy killers are typically people who are employed in healthcare or caregiver positions and will intentionally harm or kill people under their care. Some of these people are under the delusion that these people are just suffering and are beyond help, so they're better off dead. They use their position of power to take their life away from them. However, not all killers that fall under the category of angel of death are doing it because they just believe that the person is suffering and they want to get rid of the suffering. The sadistic angel of death will try to kill their victim simply as a way of exerting power over their helpless victim. These people most likely lack a feeling of gratitude and power in their normal everyday lives, so they take it out on the helpless people who are under their care. So the last category within this category is the malignant hero. This is where they will endanger the person's life, but nevertheless, they will do everything in their power to try and resuscitate them, or at least try and make it look like they're trying to resuscitate them. Of course, they usually fail, but they're hoping to be seen as this selfless hero who did everything in their power to save this helpless person. And then, of course, others will try to kill their patients just for the monetary gain. A lot of these killers work in the medical field, and many of them were drawn to the medical field in the first place because of their fascination for life and death. Harold Shipman was an English family doctor who made it look like his elderly patients were dying of natural causes after signing himself into their wills and making a ton of money off of their deaths. He would get really close with his victims and make them trust him and make them believe that he just wanted what was best for them. He killed around 216 known victims, but he is thought to have killed up to 250 victims before he was caught. All of this just to make money. Richard Angelo was an American nurse who would inject his patients with drugs, then rush into their rooms to attempt to save them so that the patient's family would see him as a hero. He killed about 25 victims before he was caught. We know a lot about the psyche of killers who grew up with horrific childhoods, but it's not as well known why these killers do what they do. However, there are some highlighted behaviors and signs for healthcare killers, which include a history of mental instability, seeking attention after someone dies, history of difficult personal relationships. They've had problems with substance abuse in their past, and they prefer night shifts where there are less supervisors and are able to kind of predict when a patient is going to die. However, we don't necessarily know the background and histories of why these people become the way that they do and why they have such a fascination with death. The next motive that we are going to be discussing is the need for dominance. Just like with the angel of death, but these killers simply just want to show power over a helpless victim in any way, shape, or form. They want to reduce their victims to a complete state of submission. Just like with a lot of killers, the psyche behind a killer who seeks utter dominance is because of severe childhood abuse. They were made to feel helpless, humiliated, and unwanted. Because of this, they grew up to want to inflict the same feeling onto others and to finally feel like they have control. In one extreme form, the killer will want to turn their victim into almost a completely passive doll that they have complete control over. Someone who won't fight back, someone who just listens and obeys their every whim. Some of them even feel comfort knowing that they have someone who follows their every order. They feel comfort from having someone there to combat their loneliness. They start feeling this twisted sense of acceptance by their victim, and it's the only way that they know how to find comfort and control. The next and possibly most disturbing motive for murder is cannibalism. Most of us completely cringe at the sheer idea of cannibalism and could never wrap our heads around why this would even be something that anyone could want. However, something that I found in my research, which is very surprising and is completely disturbing, shows that cannibalistic urges can actually be deeply rooted in our evolutionary makeup. Research shows that our closest evolutionary primate engage in cannibalism, and it shows that our ancestors, proven by human fossil records, have engaged in cannibalism. It's absolutely disturbing, but research shows that this is something that has happened in every region of the world since the beginning of time. Studies show that people have engaged in cannibalism for many different reasons, from survival all the way to ceremonies and rituals. But we don't really know why people still do it in the 21st century. Obviously, when we're talking about cannibals, our minds jump straight to Jeffrey Dahmer and Albert Fish. However, when they were asked why they did what they did, why they wanted to eat people, they didn't really say much besides it tastes good. It's a psychological phenomenon that I, along with most others, could never understand. Next, we are going to be talking about what I think is the next most disturbing motive, which is necrophilia. Necrophilia describes someone who is obsessed with death and who gets sexual arousal from the thought, smell, sight, or feel of dead bodies. They will sometimes engage in physical activities with dead people, which is hard to even say in the first place, let alone think of someone actually doing. It's another psychological phenomenon that is incredibly difficult to understand, and there's not a ton known on why this happens. One example comes from a man named Ralph Waldo Emerson. His wife, Ellen, had actually passed away, and he was so devastated by her passing that he actually dug up her body and defiled her body. As disgusting and unthinkable as this is, it's at least something that we could possibly wrap our head around. Someone who's so upset over their wife's death that they just need one last hurrah with them, which again is completely disturbing, but it's something that I think we could understand someone doing. But another man named Henry Blot from France would just go dig up bodies in the cemeteries to defile their bodies. This is just something that's so inconceivable and so disturbing that we can't even begin to understand what drives someone to do this. And of course, we know that some killers will murder their victim and then defile their bodies after doing so. So the next motive that we will be discussing is profit. Those who kill for profit are people who just see their victims as objects who they can manipulate and destroy without any remorse or conscience, just for their own gain. A huge example of this is H.H. Holmes, who, yes, he was motivated by a sexual fetish, but he was also largely motivated by the monetary gain that he could get. One of the scams that he would do was to use the dead bodies to defraud insurance companies. Then I also want us to think back to Harold Shipman, who we used an example of mercy killing, but who also fits this category. He used his power as a doctor to make his patients feel comfortable and trusting, but was largely motivated by the money that he could get from their wills. Again, it's hard to understand what drives people to these extreme measures just to obtain some sort of gain, but nevertheless, when money is involved, you never know what people might do. Again, these people have that psychological concoction that we talked about in yesterday's episode, and so these people just see their victims as nothing more than pawns that will take them to their gains and nothing more. Probably one of the most understood and unfortunate reasons for killers to commit their heinous crimes is for celebrity status. As a society, we are obsessed with serial killers, whether it be because we want to understand them or because we just find them interesting. Everyone watching this, and me especially, are partially responsible for the celebrity status that we give killers. However, this is nothing new. It's not something that is invented through YouTube or through media or through movies. People as far back as we can go have been fascinated with crime. It's natural for us to see a disaster being reported on the news and have our interests immediately piqued. And this has been happening since before TVs even started reporting on the media. Tragedies were printed in newspapers and people would flock to go buy them. It's human nature. And what also is human nature is wanting attention. So many of us wish that we could be known for something, but some people are willing to go to extreme lengths to do this. Whether their extreme lengths be doing stupid stuff on YouTube so that they can get 1 million views, or doing something even more extreme. Some killers revel in reports that the news are making about them. We know that many killers are people who don't have anything in their lives going for them and don't really have people who care about them. They are people who can't really hold a job or a meaningful relationship. Even those who have families and successful careers, such as John Wayne Gacy, who had an amazing job, multiple wives, and families, still felt like they had nothing inside. They need more eyes on them, and they just need to be recognized. Seeing their names on TVs and newspapers and books brings them so much joy and pleasure. Sometimes, even before they're caught and no one knows who they are, simply enjoy people speculating about them and talking about their crimes that they committed. Murdering people is the only way that they feel that they can make their mark on this world. Many of these murderers are motivated by other things, of course, such as simply a hatred for the world or a specific type of victim, or because they were abused and want to harm others. But either way, these types of killers know that they won't get their name in headlines unless they commit a number of atrocities, and they enjoy the attention that they receive. The pleasure that they get from this attention is more of a secondary gain because, of course, they're first driven by their own dark, sick, psychological issues, but this could also be what drives them to do it more and more and more. So the last motive is really just a blanket motive that we've kind of already touched on more specifically already, but probably the biggest reason for a killer to commit these crimes is out of sexual pleasure. Sexual undertones or overtones are found in almost every famous serial killer that we know of. Albert Fish, John Wayne Gacy, Jeffrey Dahmer, these killers all had sexual motive above all else for what they did. Again, most of these killers had traumatizing upbringings. These individuals lack feelings of love, remorse, empathy, or guilt. It takes a high level of arousal for them to feel anything, so it's no surprise that the same goes for sexual arousal. Because they don't feel love or compassion for others and they need such high levels of excitement to become sexually aroused, they end up doing the most extreme and heinous thing a person can do to finally feel gratification. Many of these serial killers started smaller with other types of perversions. This can include maybe stealing panties from an unsuspecting woman, or voyeurism, spying on an unsuspecting victim while they're dressing or engaging in sexual acts themselves. This can grow into sadism, which is enjoying and getting pleasure out of the psychological or physical suffering of others. We see in a lot of killers that they have histories of sadism or early fetishizing behaviors. But of course, this isn't enough for them. They become bored of these smaller fetishes and they need more. They grow and grow until eventually they need to cause the ultimate suffering on their victims to reach sexual gratification. Most killers like this don't reach sexual gratification from the murder itself, but by the power that they have over their victims during or what they do to their bodies after. It's all about needing power, high arousal, and having no empathy or sympathy for others. Many of the motives that we discussed are completely intertwined. There are many serial killers who choose to kill because of a history of childhood abuse, who are sexually motivated and want monetary gain, for example. There are killers who want to be seen as a hero, but who also get gratification from what they do. It's a sick and twisted concoction of mental disturbances. The reason for going through each motive is so that we can understand exactly what they are looking to gain from killing. It's not common that someone will kill simply to kill. There's other reasons behind it, no matter how sick and twisted they might be. So those are the main motives that we find in serial killers and some of the research behind why. Again, some of these motives are not well understood and there's not a ton of research on them. And again, one common denominator that we find is a history of trauma. But even then, not all serial killers had a history of a traumatizing upbringing. So there's still so much more research to be done. So that is it for today's episode of our Psychology of a Killer series. In tomorrow's episode, we are kind of going to be going over how serial killers do what they do. If you are enjoying the series so far, please make sure to leave this video a thumbs up and subscribe to my channel. Don't forget to turn on notifications so you don't miss another episode in our Psychology of a Killer series. Make sure to go ahead and follow my Twitter and Instagram. Both will be linked in the description box below. With that, I hope you guys are having a great day, and I will see you tomorrow for episode number 3. Bye!